Hello everybody and welcome back to the Fortress of Solitude. Today we're going to be checking out Ultimate Spider-Man issue 7 by Jonathan Hickman and Marco Checchetto. The months continue to tick down in the Ultimate Universe and Peter and Harry continue to learn the superheroing ropes, this time with the help of Otto Octavius. Right off the bat, this issue Hickman just upends the usual Spider-Man status quo tropes, pairing all these characters who should be enemies of each other together and making them pretty much friends and work colleagues, and it works. It's so good. So Otto has joined Harry and Peter to help with their suits, explaining that Peter's suit is an even more advanced version of the Goblin suit. Another really interesting change, since I've always had it the other way around where the Goblin suit was, thanks to all of Harry and Norman's money, is the height of advancement and technology, with the glider and everything, whereas the Spider-Man costume is just, it's a costume. It has little bits of tech in it, like his web shooters and whatnot, but it's not overly advanced. The symbiote comparisons continue as well, as every time we see the suit or a piece of the suit, like the one Otto extracts to study later, which I'm sure is going to come back in some way, it looks very much like the black symbiote. It's all sort of spidery and there's like a little black glob of like goo, basically. A tech-based symbiote would be really awesome and a great tonal shift from the fleshy alien of the 616 universe, complete opposite almost. Otto goes on to explain that both suits have onboard AIs that he can turn on once he takes the suits out of safe mode, and they can have a custom profile to them. Basically, Tony's AI almost. How he has Jarvis or, Friday or any of the other dozens of AIs he has, these suits also have them. This is where Hickman wonderfully showcases the differences between Peter and Harry's hero's journey, as Peter would rather kind of forgo all the bells and whistles and just wants to kind of talk to himself and do the heroing without a voice in his head, although he does eventually come around to the idea of having an AI voice of himself in his head, where Harry welcomes it and asks Otto to input his father's identity onto the AI. This immediately set alarm bells off in my head, since I think this is how Hickman is going to do the insane goblin, or how, we're going to get an insane version of the goblin in this universe, since he's going to have the Norman AI talking Harry into being a villain and kind of berating him and forcing him to go down that route. This is also a really cool way to do that whole idea of like the goblin is like the other persona of Harry or Norman, in this case Harry. And we've seen it in the movies with Norman and how he talks to the mask and everything when it's sitting on his chair or something. And I like that Hickman is working that into the story here by having Norman be that voice and be that voice in his son's head. It's also rather sad, since Harry never got a final moment with his father before he died, and we know that he had an idealized version of his father in his head thanks to the story he told everyone about the game of catch that they never actually played, but he seems to think they did. So I can see him using this as a chance to get that version of his father back and give him some closure. Outside of Pete and Harry's adventures in superheroing land, MJ and Gwen are in the book, although they're not in it for very long. They're in it for a single page actually, and it does reveal a little bit of information about them, with Gwen having bought a stake in the paper, Jonah and Ben's newspaper venture, having bought the building that they moved into last issue, and she and MJ have come by to kind of check out what their money has been invested in. The fact that these two are being paired up and are having their own story outside of Peter and Harry's influence. They're doing their own thing, which is something that the main storyline or the main comic Spider-Man in 616 universe never really does. Usually it's Peter's story that informs what MJ is doing. So I like that they've completely moved them separately from the men in the book, which is great. And I like that it's something the main Spider-Man book could probably do, since they do the opposite in a gross degree, where the men's story always informed the women's story and never vice versa, or never having them separate all that much. Ben and Jonah meanwhile aren't in the office when the girls head around to see them, since they are busy running down a lead and meeting with a shadowy, very deep throat-like individual who has been feeding them info on what's been going on the Daily Planet side of things. The man they meet is revealed to be Robbie Robertson, their old friend, who feels that it's his job to make sure the truth gets out there, and he makes it known while he wants to join Ben and Jonah in their little venture, he figures staying at the Bugle will help them out better in the long run. These little Ben Jonah portions of the book really add a thriller vibe to everything, since it feels like movies like All the President's Men, Woodward and Bernstein running down leads and following trails to find out what the big time politician, in this case Fisk, is up to, and what are his connections to the Maker's Cabal and all that sort of stuff, trying to expose this man for who he really is. It's really great and stuff you really think you would see a bit more of in a Spider-Man book, being that, Peter himself is a journalist and works for a paper, but you never really see all that much of, and I like that Hickman seems to have thought about that and has now got Ben and Jonah to fill that portion of the book. Speaking of Fisk and his side of things, Captain Britain arrives in New York to meet with Fisk, meeting him in a really cool building that is hidden away in plain sight in the middle of town that no one can see and is used for these shadowy meetings of the Makers group. Britain is there because Bullseye has gone missing, and he learns from Fisk that two men attacked him recently, those being Goblin and Spider-Man. We also get a sense of the timeline of things here, as Britain makes it clear that he recently fought the Ultimates, realizing that things are beginning to get out of control as heroes are beginning to appear and people who are opposing them are becoming more and more frequent. However, he thinks he's got a solution, revealing he's now got a team of Bullseyes. Fisk, however, declines the help since he's assembling his own rather sinister team for when the heroes return. Now, this is some really nice setup for the coming issues, as the Sinister Six have already been revealed to be in the book and Fisk is going to be the one leading them, interestingly enough. Fisk also kind of steps out of line here, as it's really interesting to see that it kind of inferred, or at least I kind of inferred, that Britain is bringing in these Bullseyes to make Fisk think that he needs them, like he needs to keep relying on the Maker's resources and, his support and everything, whereas Fisk is now realizing, maybe I don't need these people. I've got kind of control of the city a little bit. I can deal with these guys myself, and maybe if I can deal with these guys, maybe I can also deal with Captain Britain or whoever else gets sent my way. And I kind of like that there's allusions to that. It's not, made outwardly known, but that's kind of how I took this little interaction, because Britain also kind of playfully points out that, Fisk is kind of moving out on his own and kind of taking things into his own hands a little bit here, and kind of interested to see where things goes. And I'm with him as well. I'm really interested to see if this ends with Fisk turning on the Maker and his cabal. Peter and Harry, meanwhile, continue their training under Otto's watchful eye, and the duo decide to input their new AIs, Harry being his father and Pete being another version of himself, and after a painful shock, both suits reboot with the new and improved AIs inside them. Peter quickly finds that the AI probably is not the best idea, as it begins kind of showering him with praise, calling him, the best dad ever, and he's so good at the superhero stuff, and everyone around him is an idiot, and all that sort of stuff. He sees that as not useful at all, and I really agree with him. It's not useful having basically a yes man in your ear the entire time, which is a little bit indicative of how AI actually works nowadays, where it just kind of showers you with praise when you try and tell it things, and it tries to placate your every wish and tries to make you happy, something which can be dangerous. Harry's AI is obviously his father, and it helps him during his and Pete's sparring session, helping him get the better of Spider-Man a couple of times during their fight. Like I said, the voice is absolutely going to be the one we see sort of in the films and in other comics, where it just kind of speaks in Harry's ear and it's kind of the devil on his shoulder, and we kind of see that here a little bit, where it starts insulting Harry and calling him soft and useless and not worth any of its time, and Harry of course pushes himself to be better, and it ends with him ending up almost hurting Peter, although it doesn't obviously hurt Peter because he's, Spider-Man. He can kind of shrug things off a normal man couldn't, like a chest arc beam that shot from Harry's suit into him. So we obviously know that Harry's Norman AI is going to obviously corrupt him, and we know that Peter obviously has an AI as well, and I kind of like the idea that it keeps building on this idea that, maybe Pete's suit, or a piece of Pete's suit, like the one that Otto took, might become his symbiote. And I like the idea that maybe this AI goes rogue and that's what becomes Venom. It's like an evil version of Peter, more or less. It could be a great way to sort of combine things, because we've seen this universe is combining a lot of different things, and I like the idea that maybe it could combine it into maybe making it like a Venom Ben Reilly or something. You know, it's kind of like a clone of Peter, but not really, and it's got this AI symbiote suit, so it's technically a Venom, but it's Ben Reilly. There's really interesting ways that Hickman can take this, and I'm really looking forward to seeing if all of these things actually do come true. It's just me just putting things out into the ether and hope that they will happen. But there's things like Otto taking that sample, and you know, just things that we've seen so far that are obviously very much like Hickman setting things up for the future. As the friends finish up their sparring, Otto gets another Stark Network signal similar to the hero's suits, and it's not long before Iron Lad appears in the sparring room, returning on his promise from 6 months prior and hoping that Spider-Man and Green Goblin have become heroes in that time. I'm so excited for the big team up of all the heroes, but Tony's question is much more interesting to me, since really both Harry and Pete aren't heroes, as they haven't really done much heroics. We've seen very briefly Spider-Man doing very basic heroics, but they both haven't had, you know, that defining moment that each of these characters usually have, that sort of, I guess, that anchor moment that kind of cements them as like heroes. They haven't had that because they've basically been trying to work out how and why they have these powers, and you know, what for. And of course we know what for, but they're still trying to work that out and trying to work out how to use these powers to help people. And they don't even know if they want to help people, because obviously you've got Harry who wants to use these powers to attack the Maker and all his people, where Pete just kind of wants to stay the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man and help out the neighborhood. Not only that, but this can also be applied to the Ultimates in general as well, since they haven't really had that big heroic moment yet. They kind of fought Captain Britain, but that was kind of just like a skirmish. They haven't had that big moment where they finally are revealed to be like true, honest to God heroes. They've kind of just been tinkering around, gathering people up to fulfill their ranks, you know, making sure Thor doesn't die, gathering Hank Pym and Janet Van Dyne and all these other characters. So I'm really looking forward to that moment where it kind of clicks for these heroes and where they actually do stand up and become heroes, and I think it's going to be really satisfying. Ultimate Spider-Man continues firing on all cylinders with every new decision that Hickman does in the book, from character choices like Harry getting an AI version of his father in his Green Goblin suit to fill the gap of his dead father, or Wilson Fisk striking out on his own away from the Maker's influence with his own Sinister Six team. It all makes me so excited for the future of this book and the new Ultimate Universe in general. I'm going to give this issue a 10 out of 10.